In our first article, n8n, for easy extract, transform, and load, we explored how to create an ETL workflow using n8n. We will build upon the sample in this workflow to explain the benefits of using n8n workflows when it comes to documentation. Documentation of processes is tedious, and even more so, maintaining accurate, up-to-date documentation that is synchronized with the inevitable process changes is even more challenging. Because n8n workflows are stored in JSON, we can leverage AI tools like Claude to make the documentation process simple and easy to keep up to date. Let's quickly recap our workflow. The demonstration shows an ETL process that reads a supplier product's CSV file and inserts or updates records in a retailer database. The records in the supplier file do not align perfectly with our database schema, so we have to map records in the supplier file to match our expected format. This includes product naming conventions, sizing, quantity, and color information. We can export our workflow into JSON format by clicking the ellipses in the top right-hand corner and clicking Download. This will save our JSON workflow to disk. In our demonstration, we will be using Claude Desktop. I have added the n8n JSON export file to our conversation. For our prompt, we will use the following. This document represents an n8n workflow for an extract, transform, load operation. Read the document and create a markdown file that explains what the nodes do in the sequence they appear. Let's take a couple of minutes to see how Claude handles this out of the box. Feel free to pause this video at any point for a closer examination of the document generation. We can see that Claude has started to create our markdown document for us, using the n8n JSON export as the reference. Claude is also able to determine the correct sequence of operations for our documentation from the JSON. As the generation progresses, we can see Claude is documenting the names of the database columns, the select filters, and logic to perform data transformations quite well. Claude ends this documentation with a very good high-level summary titled Key Features, describing what the workflow does and how it is achieved. Let's look at an example of the documentation generated for the node that reads the supplier file. There are some peculiarities in our business logic that could not be picked up from the JSON for this node. Specifically, the directory path of the supplier file is always the supplier ID. n8n allows us to append notes to our nodes. These notes will be included in the workflow's exported JSON. We can use these notes to provide more detail when necessary, so that it is included in our documentation. We will add the following note to the node, which reads our supplier CSV file. The path of the supplier file will always follow a convention where the directory name is the supplier ID, and the file name will always be latest.csv, regardless of supplier. To illustrate how easy it is to maintain up-to-date documentation, we are going to make a change to our workflow. We will add a conditional node that will stop and throw an error if no default product could be found in the database. After re-exporting our workflow, we again use Claude to generate updated documentation. We change the prompt slightly, adding the instructions, if there are notes on the node, include them in the documentation, to the previous prompt. If we look at the generated markdown, we now see that the notes we added for the node that reads the supplier CSV file are contained in our documentation. Earlier, we made modifications to our workflow, adding error handling if the SQL query which selects a default template product does not return any result. If we look at the generated markdown after our update, we can see that the conditions and the error are documented for us. This is just a simple example of typical types of changes made to business processes and highlights how n8n can help keep our documentation current. In this demonstration, we showed how AI tools along with n8n can be leveraged to manage the difficult task of keeping documentation current and relevant. It does not stop there. Building upon the tools n8n provides us with boundless potential to scale and evolve our business processes. Some examples might include automating the documentation generation every time the workflow file changes, or including another process for approvals of workflow changes that are required before moving the changes into a production environment. Hopefully, this demonstration helps to spark your imagination about how some of these concepts can fit into your business.